Okay, so let's talk about the mask shapes now. So I'm going to delete all of these nodes. I don't need that, and I want this one. Let's leave it for now. I don't need this. Okay, so we have this. Let's leave it. And if you create, let's create a new node, new background node, and we can apply masks to this background node. So generally we apply a rectangle mask, a ellipse mask, um, the polygon mask, and there is also some other mask, but these three masks are basically going to be very important in my tutorials because I have created all the lower thirds with these nodes. So let's talk about these nodes first. So this is a rectangle, just a rectangle mask, and if you go into the tools panel, you can see the setting. You can adjust the width and height. So let's turn the size down, smooth out the corners by corner radius. I can change the angle and stuff. So these two are special masks because they are very common, and so they have created especially for that purpose. So you can see in the ellipse mask also I have width and height control, and yeah, border width is important if you want to create an outline. So we just have to click on the solid, and then you can increase the border width to create an outline. This works with the rectangle as well. Pretty much all the shape mask, I think. You also have bitmap mask, which basically convert an object into a mask based on its luminance value or alpha value. Okay, so but I'm not going to talk about this. So ellipse and rectangle. Okay, you can change the opacity of the mask by this level. Okay, so let's connect this mask to our this solid layer. So I'm just going to simply do that. You can see um, the mask is applied to this background. Let's reset the angle. Okay, so these are like a special masks, especially designed for these purposes because we use it most often. But the most important thing is the polygon mask, where you can create any kind of shape, and that will become a mask. So let's connect this to our background and let's draw something. Okay, so you can see I have created a shape. Okay, and right now this is called the polygon mask, obviously. You see the result in the viewer, and I can add many points if I want. You can see there is a toolbar on the left side, and right now it is selected. I have selected the insert and modify tool. You can see here in this area, whatever, actually this is a taskbar, and it will give you a lot of information wherever you put your cursor. So I have currently selected the insert and modify tool, and that's why wherever I click, I insert a point. I can delete the point just by hitting the delete key. If you do not want to insert any points, you can switch to modify only tool, and that won't insert any point, but you can edit your points. Okay, so right now the type of interpolation is set to linear. So if you want to smooth this point out, you can just simply click on this button, or you can hit the shift plus S key and it will smooth it out. So let's select everything and hit shift S. We have created a smooth shape. You can also create rectangles and ellipse if you want. So you just have to right click in the center and go into the polyline options, go to the create option, and you can create an ellipse, and you can set your width and height. Then if I fit that, you can see I have a ellipse, but I don't get the same settings as you get it here. Okay, these are different settings. I can also create a rectangle or square. All right, so these settings these things are also available in the polygon mask. And the good thing about this mask is that you get the access to individual points which you can't in this one. Okay, so there are some control points, but actually you can't get the access of the individual points, but you have like this one has a corner radius which you do not have in this one. But you can add those things, like if I go in there and let's say I have inserted 2 points and I'm going to smooth this thing out, and I'm going to move that like this, so I can sort of smooth this thing out if I want, something like this. All right, so okay, let's talk about the paint mode. So when we combine different masks, we can set their paint mode to subtract, add, or merge and other stuff. What you have to do is, let's say I want, this is my first mask, and if you select that node, you can go into the properties, you can say you can invert the mask if you want. Let's combine these two masks together. So let me set this to solid, and I'm gonna set the border width to default settings. So let's connect these two things together. You can see that each mask accepts an mask input. Okay, so now this rectangle is connected to the ellipse, and now if I go onto the ellipse, you can see I have an extra option called paint mode, and right now it is set to merge, which basically means add. I can, oh, there is an add, but if I set this to subtract, you can see now my ellipse is subtracting the rectangle. Okay, let's connect this to our polygon, and on the polygon let's create something weird. Okay, now I want to set this thing to minimum. You can see you can play with different paint modes, and they are very important while you create some specific shape. So that's it for this masking and stuff. There are few controls. Okay, so like for example, let's say you want to align these points. So Fusion does not have guides in the viewer. You have guides in the timeline and spline, but you don't have any guide system in the viewer. To fix that, you can use a few things. You can use the point editor. So if you select any point and hit the E key on your keyboard, a small window will pop up, and this will give you information about the X and Y position of the point. So let's say I want to align these points together. Let's say I have so many points here, okay, and I want to align them to a single line. What I can do is I can select any one points, and just going to copy the Y position, and it is set to default, it is set to group. Okay, and select all the points, and I will paste that setting and hit enter. They will all become basically a straight line. So this is very important. You can also use another things, like let's change this again. You can use some secret keys here. So let's talk about those things. So if you want to move your mask, you can definitely use the manipulator. If you do not want to move the manipulator, you can move the entire shape by selecting all the points, and then you can hold any of the point and you can move it. You can also use your alt key. So press the alt key and move it from anywhere you want. It will work the same way. If you want to scale your mask, you can press the S key on your keyboard, and you can drag your mouse left to right, or up, left to right, to scale in and scale out. Here one very important thing, wherever your mouse is, your imaginary point is going to be set at that position. For example, if I want to scale it from, let's say, from here, so when I scale, my anchor point is going to be set from here. For example, let's press the S key and let's drag. You can see that my mask is being scaled from that point. If I want to scale it from here, I can scale it from here. If I want to scale it from this point, I can scale it from this point. Okay, let's say I want to rotate the mask. You can obviously use these controls, right, like Z control, but I am talking about some secret keys because they are not present unless you go into the manual and dig deep. Okay, so if you want to rotate that, you can press the T key and select everything, press T key, and you can move. And obviously here the same control works. Wherever you click, your anchor point is going to be set at that point. Okay, so T is for twist. So there is very interesting modifier here. If you press the O key, you can offset the path. So this is different from scaling it, although it looks like it's scaling, but it's not. It's maintaining the normals of the points. So if I go in that, you can see it starts to change. So it sometimes it's very useful. Okay, so this is the offset. So press the O key and you can offset your path. Then we have some scaling methods. So if you want to scale it, you can use the S key, but you can also use X and Y to basically restrict the movement vertically or horizontally. So if you want your scaling to be restricted to horizontal scaling, you can press the X key. And if you want your movement to be your scaling to be restricted to Y position, Y axis, or vertically, you can press the Y key on your keyboard. Make sure that you first press the key and then you can move your mouse, otherwise it won't work. Okay, you can change the pivot if you want. So this is your manipulator, and you can basically move, rotate, and scale. Where is the scale? Proportional scale. So you can move, rotate, and scale. And if you want to change the pivot of this mask, you can press the M key, and then you can move your pivot point anywhere you want. So I have set this here. Now if I rotate the Z, it should be rotating around that point. All right, now we also have shape box here. So select all of the points. I'm going to select all the points, and if you click that shape box button, you can also press the Shift plus B key. Then you can scale this box like this. You can press the Control key to symmetrically align the transformation on one axis. So this is horizontal symmetric transformation. If I modify it from here by pressing the Control key, I am symmetrically modifying this shape vertically. I can also use the corners, and you can do modification like this. You can use your Shift key to do some non-uniform transformation as well. All right, so I think I have covered everything about the shapes. All right, let me give you a quick tip. If you want to scale your points like we did with the point editor, horizontally, like all points at the same plane, scale them vertically. So if you press the Y key and let's scale this thing up like this, you just keep moving your mouse down and it will be completely flat like this. So let's set these things, and I'm going to this point. I can press the Control key to select extra points. So let's align them here. So I'm going to this time use the X key, and I'm just going to move there like this. All right, one thing I forgot to talk about is the let's select the polygon tool, and you can see that the interpolation is set to linear. I can set this to smooth by Shift S. I can set this back to linear by Shift L, and I can also break the handle symmetry. So right now I can have, if I move the handle, you can see that both handles are joined. If you press the Control key and move any of the handle, you can break the symmetry of the handle. Okay, so that's it for the mask. Let's talk about the viewer. All right, so you can see that the first option is sub viewer, and these are like viewers inside a viewer. These are like helper viewers. So you can turn on different kinds of like waveform. Turn on this thing first. You can see the waveform, you can see the vector scope and things like that. If you want to, you can turn on these things. And now we have this where you can set the viewing scale. Right now it is set to 54%. If you can set this to 100% and see your actual composition. If you want to fit your window, if you want to fit your viewer into the window, you can press the Control F key, or you can just press the fit key here also. All right, these are some masks as we have already talked about. So each viewer has two buffers, A and B, and you can use this buffer to basically compare your results. So for example, I'm seeing my result in the A buffer. By default it is set to A. So let's apply a effect. Let's apply a blur to it. Okay, I think it should have connected. All right, so let's blur this thing out. Now right now it is set to buffer A. So I'm going to put this node here, and I will switch to buffer B, and I put my blur node in here. And you can see that if I switch the buffers, I can see that and you can see the name here, okay, which node is currently displayed. And if I switch to AB, you can see that it's a system where you can compare, you can see the result, how it's affecting. You can rotate this thing and you can move it and gauge the actual progress of your work. So for example, let's apply a color curves. I can also use it from here. So let's set this color to something like this. You can see that how it's affecting. Okay, so I can set this blur to buffer 1, and I can set buffer B to it is already set. So let's go to AB, and you can see how it has affected my composition. Alright, so this is A and B buffers. If you want to clear the buffers, you just simply press the tilde key. Tilde key is above your tab key. Alright, so let's go back to the A buffer, and I'm going to just drag and drop my node tree. Okay, we have snaps. I'm not going to talk about the stereo and LUT and 360 stuff. I'm going to talk about only those things which are going to be relevant to my tutorials. Okay, so snap is you can use snaps while you move your objects inside the viewer. So I have currently turned on, and it is set to pixel boundaries. You can also set it to pixel centers, but let's see how it works. So for that you can also turn on the pixel grid. So go to the options and turn on show pixel grid, but it is not visible unless you zoom into that pixel level. You can see that these are individual pixels. And let's select our polygon mask. Where is that? Okay, so you can see the handles here, they are not aligned to the pixels. So if I try to move that, you can see that they are snapping to the pixel boundaries. If I set this to pixel centers, turn this thing on, it will snap to the pixel centers, but I like this to be pixel boundaries. The only thing I think is missing is that when you create your polygon mask, even your snap button is turned on, it does not snap to the pixel boundaries. That is very annoying. So I have to go manually and set my points to actually snap to the pixel boundaries. All right, so this option is so turn on the snap and then turn on your pixel grid. Okay, you can also turn on guides. So if you're working for broadcast, you know what this means. Okay, so let's turn this thing off. Then we have, this is very important. So if this is called this on-screen control, show controls. You can use control plus K key to toggle this thing. You can see if it is turned off, there is no manipulator in the viewport, so it's very difficult to control your objects. This is basically useful when you're working with animation, because sometimes you want to see the clean viewer, so you just simply turn this thing off. But when you have to edit the shapes or anything that has a manipulator, you have to turn this thing on. Right next to it is you can also have lock view. Lock view is something if you lock the viewer, it will be locked. So if I apply any other thing in here, for example, let's apply another color corrector. Let's try to change this thing. You can see it's not reflecting in that because it is locked. So if I unlock it, it will start working. And then we have the transparency, which you can turn on and off. Smooth resize doesn't matter. 1:1 pixel ratio. If you have different aspect ratio, you can compare those things here. And then you have a normalize button and some color controls. Normalize button is very useful if you're working with high dynamic range images, like if the value is greater than 1 or below negative and stuff. So you can basically, if you have a greater dynamic range, they will compress to 0 to 1, and it is easier to see that thing into the viewer. All right, let's talk about the timeline and keyframe animation, spline editors. Okay, so to keyframe any property, you can just go into the tools panel and right click and choose animate. So let's go in there. There is already a position animation applied. I'm going to, let's select this mask, and let's go to the width and height. I'm going to set a keyframe here. Let's go into the frame, it's 30, and set a keyframe on width and height. Then go back and let's turn this thing down to 0. So if you change the property, it will automatically insert a keyframe here. So you can see my ellipse is scaling and moving. All right, so this is how you create your keyframes. If you want to delete the animation on this property, you just right click and choose remove. If you want to change the keyframe positions, you have to go into the timeline. You can't change it from here. Okay, so go into the timeline, and you can see that right now I have only one layer, but that is something I have set earlier. I'm going to turn off animated, and you can see that I have 4 layers, and basically I have 4 nodes in my flow editor, and each node is going to be displayed as a layer in the timeline. But if you're coming from a layer based background, the compositing order does not depend here on the layer order. Okay, so compositing order depends on how we connect nodes in the node editor, in the flow editor. Okay, so just be clear about that. There are few settings in here like all tools hierarchy and stuff, and there are some filters as well, but most of the time I like to choose all tools and animated. There are some things like type, names, stars. So if you click on the name, they will stack based on the alphabetical order. You can choose type, so they will stack based on their node type. Hierarchy is the most confusing one. You can use reverse if you want to. So let me, reverse is similar to, like, sometimes it's similar to After Effects, and sometimes I use it basically it displays layers inside layers. Okay, so let me give you this example. So let's go into the flow editor and rename this node. So to rename the node, you can press the F2 function key, select the node and press the F2 function key, and change the name whatever you want. So if I go into the timeline and if I set this to reverse, you can see they are all stacked into a single layer. So if I can open that, let me put this thing here so that I can see both flow editor and timeline at the same time. Okay, so if you want to change the layout, you simply just click and drag, and you can see if you want to put right there, just like a tab, you can release here. If you want to the side, to the right side, to the left side, top, bottom, you can just leave it there. So I want this thing to be here, I don't want it to be anywhere else. So okay, so you can see that this is the first node, start is the first node. If I open that, I will get 2 nodes, background 18.1 and background 18. I can rename this to, let's set this to A and this one to B, and you can see that I have 2 layers, A and B, and B has one more. So if I open that, it will open an ellipse mask, and it has all the animated properties. So sometimes I use reverse, but most of the time I use all tools, and I set this to animated, so only the animated property, animated node is going to be displayed. And in conjunction with that, I also use selected. For example, let's create another node and set this here. I'm going to apply a rectangular mask to it, and let's just animate its height property. So I'm going to move this keyframe here, I'm going to turn the height down. So you can see I have two layers animated, these two layers. But if I you can see that all the animated nodes are displayed in the timeline right now, ellipse and rectangle. But if I set this to selected, only the selected node is going to be displayed. And this is very important, this is very helpful when your node tree grows bigger and bigger and you want it to work on certain node animations. So for example, if I want to work with these nodes, I just select that and their animated properties are going to be displayed in the timeline. So let's open that. Okay, so to move keyframes, you can see that the keyframe and the graph is overlaid on top of the layer, but and you can change the keyframe position from here, but never do that. You always open that and then you can change your keyframes, otherwise sometime it creates problem. Okay, so to open that, let's say if you have 10 layers, if you want to open all of them, you can press the plus button and it will expand every property, and if you click again, it will collapse. Okay, you can also click on the value button, which basically displays the value of the keyframe like this, and then you can go and manually enter values if you want. And you also have a spreadsheet. So let's select the height. You can see the keyframe numbers and their values. Okay, sometimes it's useful. You have time stretch tool, very important. So if I want to manipulate so many keyframes at once, I can select that and activate time stretch tool. Then I can control their duration with just one shape box. Okay, if you want to zoom in, zoom out, you can use the same shortcuts. Just press the control key and scroll your mouse wheels. You can press the control F key to fit that view into the into the play global range. You have to, I think, turn off animated. So let's do that once again. Yeah, sometimes it creates problem, but yeah, it works. You can also press this button to fit. Okay, so let's zoom in, click that, and it works. So you can use your keyboard control F or this button. You can also use these buttons to zoom in, zoom out. You can use the plus and minus keys on your keyboard to zoom in, zoom out. Control F to fit. And what else? You have some attributes, like if you want to animate, if you only want to see the mask, you can set there. You can create also filters. These are options I don't want to talk about right now. All right, so we are done with the timeline. So generally I set this thing to all tools and animated, and sometimes selected to just see exactly what I want to see. Okay, so then we have spline editor. Okay, so this is spline editor where you edit your curves, and here are also some filters and some stuff. So let's talk about that. So let's say I want to focus on the ellipse right now, so I'm going to select my ellipse and set this to selected. So only this node's properties are displayed in here, and I want to, let's say, work on the movement, the position of this this circle, and that is basically center path. So let's go and first fit this curve into the viewer. To do that, either you can click on this button, zoom to fit, or you can use control F shortcut key. You can also focus on a particular area if you want, and then control F to fit it back. selected button is turned on, which means only the selected nodes graph is going to be displayed in here. And there are other options as well, like one, none, and all. Right now nothing is selected, so I can go and manually turn on other curves as well. Let's set this to, I can also zoom in, zoom out the same way in the flow editor or timeline. Okay, or you can also use these controls. So if you go if you hover your mouse here, you can see that your mouse changes to like opposing arrows, and then you can change it horizontally and vertically. But I like to use control and mouse wheels or plus minus key. All right, so many options. So right now it is selected to nothing, so I can go manually and select each points. If I set this to none, everything gets deselected. If I click on all, every curve is going to be selected. And if I just want to focus on one single curve, I can click on one and I can focus on just one curve. Okay, so right now you can see that I have a simple curve for position. Okay, so I'm going to select both points and let's set this to linear. Just shift L, select both points, shift L, and now the keyframe interpolation is set to linear. You can see that there is no time header here, but if you scrub in here, you can see there is a time header. Sometimes it's very difficult, so you have to go and find your time header, and then you can come on to area where your keyframes are. So you can do, you have to press your control plus alt key, and then you can scrub anywhere you want. Your time header will follow your mouse. That is very useful. Sometimes I forget. So let's talk about keyframe interpolation. So I'm going to select both points, and if you want to set this to smooth, you can press the shift S key to smooth. You can press shift L to linear, and you can use let's say, so this is a linear keyframe. Shift L. If you press shift S, it will smooth out, and if you can also use flat keyframe. So just press the F key and it will flatten out. Then you have some presets, so let me show you that. Select both keyframes, right click and go into ease, and then you have linear, in quadratic and stuff. You can open the dialog box, and then you can visually see what each curve does. So let's set this to something like this. All right, and let's play our timeline. You can see how it changes. You can manually change handles if you want. There is nothing stopping you. Okay, let's set this back to linear, and there is also one important control, that is the easing control. So if you, let's set this to smooth, shift S, and if you press the T key, it will open a easing control. So you can control the in and out handles in weight actually. So you can change these handle weights by moving these numbers, these sliders. Okay, and that will affect your animation. Right, so I think I have covered everything I want. I'm pretty sure I have left so many things, but you already know that it's not possible to cover everything. Okay, so one very important thing, you can also use the other functions here. You can see you can use a shape box. So if you have, let's say, select all and you want to modify all the curves with a shape box, you can do that. You can non-uniformly scale it as well. So so you have so many controls here. I'm going to set this back to normal. Okay, let's set this to 1, focus on displacement, fit that, and you can reverse your keyframes if you want. You just have to click on this button, reverse, and it will reverse your keyframes. And there are some other keyframe interpolation methods. You also have time stretch tool similar to the timeline stretch tool. Okay, so just press that, and then you have to select it, and then you can change the duration. So I hope you learned something. Okay, so let's get started with our lower third tutorials.